Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your archbishop of banterbury, your chancellor of cheerfulness, and as we all know, your, wait for it, existential Mr. Rogers. Still don't know what that means, but that's what they call me. Robert Meyer Burnett, and I am coming at you from the Robservatory, Robcasting, you imagination connoisseurs, you members of this, the Post-Geek Singularity community. Welcome. It's episode number 423. My God, it seemed like the 400th episode was just yesterday. Time is going by quickly in quarantine. That's what I have to say. Quickly in quarantine. Luckily, I've been productive. But ladies and gentlemen, gentle beings, kind folks, however you identify, across the 28 known galaxies, it's good to be here with you today. And you know, believe it or not, I've been thinking about physical media. I think about physical media all the time. I mean, I have shelves full of physical media. I was watching my Blu-ray of Excalibur, showing it to Elizabeth. She had never seen it. I don't think she was as enamored of it as I am. But we're going to talk about that tonight at 6. Actually, it's not tonight. It's at 6 p.m. for the new episode of Elizaviews Whining About Movies, episode number 31. We have a returning director. John Boorman is the second director. I mean, we've only screened 31 movies, but we're going back to another John Boorman movie, which seems strange considering there's hundreds of directors out there. And for whatever reason, when we first started the show, I felt bad about wanting to revisit favorite directors over and over again. We haven't even watched a Fincher film yet. So anyway, we are returning to John Boorman after the triumph of Zardoz. We're going to talk about Excalibur. So anyway. So ladies and gentlemen, as many people may or may not have heard, you might not have heard this, but I'm going to tell you about it anyway. So Netflix was showing a version of Back to the Future 2 that a lot of people were up in arms with because it was edited. That's correct. It was edited. And on the John Campea show this week, I suggested that it was a mistake. I didn't think that Netflix edited the film. I don't think they do that. I think Netflix is just, they air what the studio gives them to air. And I had suggested that it was the studio's mistake, and there was probably some kind of an explanation along those lines. Well, ladies and gentlemen, yesterday, Back to the Future writer asks Universal to destroy censored version of the sequel. God love Bob Gale. Bob Gale says neither he nor director Robert Zemeckis knew the Netflix streamed version existed. Bob Gale is asking fans not to be too hard on Netflix for a censored version of Back to the Future Part 2, which was streaming for a short while. Fans of the series were irate when they discovered a tiny portion of the 1989 sequel was changed poorly. It has since been replaced with the standard version. The alteration happened when Marty finds the Ooh La La magazine within the Sports Almanac dust cover. The moment was cut short, the cover of the magazine edited out. Gale, the screenwriter of the beloved trilogy, explained what happened and why it was not Netflix's fault. The blame is on Universal, who somehow furnished Netflix an edited version of the movie, Gale said. I learned about it some 10 days ago from an eagle-eyed fan, and the studio rectified the error. The version now running is the uncensored, unedited original version. He continued, apparently this was a foreign version which neither director Robert Zemeckis nor I even knew existed for some country that had a problem with the Ooh La La magazine cover. I asked that the studio destroy this version. FYI, Netflix does not edit films. They only run the versions that are supplied to them, exactly as I suspected. So they're blameless. You can direct your ire at Universal, but I think they will be a lot more careful in the future and with the future. All 3 Back to the Future films are currently streaming on Netflix. This is something that I would imagine would be a problem that will pop up time and time again as we have become a global marketplace. And believe it or not, every country is a little different. And I understand that perhaps an Ooh La La cover with naked ladies on it would not fly in a number of realms on our planet, and I understand that. I get that. The problem is, and I hate to say this, not to besmirch the people working at the studios, because there's a lot of people that are hard workers that are, they're constantly, I don't know what's up with my hair today. They're hard workers, but the problem is the people that are working in the departments at the studios that oversee their own catalogs. You would think that the back catalog departments of the studios would be one of the most important places to work, considering basically a studio's movies are like gold bullion that used to be at Fort Knox, the kind that Auric Goldfinger wanted to take in Goldfinger. That's the value of the studio right there. Their back catalog, which can be monetized and streamed forever. It has to be preserved. If it's not preserved, what good is it? That means in the era of data management and things like that, you're going to constantly have to be updating, making sure those files, in 100 years, are those files going to work? Have you created black and white color separation masters, celluloid masters of all your movies? If not, why not? You should be doing that. You should be using some of that fat streaming check money that people send in. I don't know. What I was trying to say is that the money that streaming services are making through their subscriptions, in addition to paying for all their programming, they should also be preserving it, because it's going to be a big problem as we move forward. Quantum computing, maybe when we can store everything on pieces of glass. I know they're doing that. They're looking into those storage mediums, but the problem is when someone makes let's say you make a change for Dubai or the United Arab Republic or whatever, Arab Emirates, United Arab Emirates. If you do that and somebody forgets or it gets mixed around, if somebody's not diligently watching which version's going where, it gets put back on a shelf, and that's your version of Back to the Future that gets pulled down, or Back to the Future Part 2. These things have to be carefully tracked. This is just part of the era in which we live in. And I read this story, I was thinking about this story, and I'm like, this is a graphic, literally a graphic depiction of why physical media, physical copies of things, at least archival, are so important. And I was thinking about, I am surrounded in the Robservatory with stuff that many people would call junk. When you really think about it, why collect action figures as a middle-aged cis white male with one foot in the grave, other than to pretend I have more friends than I really do? Why would you do that? Why from the time I was a little kid do I love spaceship models? Why do I still buy them? Even if I don't build them, it's like, oh my God, they made a model of this. Why did I pre-order the 1/1000th scale of the Star Trek Discovery, Star Trek Captain Pike, Star Trek Strange New Worlds Enterprise model that is coming out this month if I fucking hate it? Why did I do that? Well, I love the Enterprise, and I'll tell you, I'm naturally attracted to the Starship Enterprise, the form of it, and having new Enterprises, even if I hate them. And let's be clear, I've hated every version of the Enterprise since 2009. The one in Discovery is less egregious than the god-awful version they gave us in the 2009 Star Trek movie, which I also have a model of, as you all know. But, why get it? Like, what does it matter? If you're buying spaceship models that you might not build, why buy them? And why would you buy models of spaceships that you would build but won't even like? I know. It makes no sense. I'll cop to that. It's a strange thing. And the collecting mentality, if I got hit by a bus tomorrow, everything in this room becomes a burden for Elizabeth to get rid of. Maybe there'll be one thing in here she might like. She does like, I do have a 3A Toys Dead Cosmonaut figure that she really likes. And she can have that. But if you think about it, like collecting books and all this, what really is the point when you think about it? You can't take it with you. I find comfort in it. I find happiness. I can go pull things off the shelf. I like that I just decided to put all of my MCU discs there just for fun. What do they mean? 4K discs are great, but it got me thinking. I collect so much crap, and when you're a genre fan, when you're a geek, when you're an imagination connoisseur, All of this stuff is just a physical manifestation of what's in your head, and it reminds you of things. You know, I like the fact that next to Alex here is a George Lucas figure. It's also the first Hot Toys figure I ever owned from the early aughts, and I like it. And he wasn't even called George Lucas; he was just called the director. But collecting things, it's part and parcel what being an imagination connoisseur is all about. But it really got me thinking about physical media. And then, of course, you know, I'm scrolling around on Facebook as I am wont to do, and I, of course, find yet another op-ed piece that I feel, oh, well, I'm going to share this op-ed piece with you. And there was a piece on filmstories.co.uk. It was published yesterday by Simon Brew. Simon Brew wrote this one. May 22nd, 2020, Simon Brew. And this was, again, on filmstories.co.uk. And right up my alley, I felt I needed to share it. And here it is. The movies, and why it's worth fighting more than ever for physical media. Low-quality streaming, unavailable films, movie edits by stealth. Why physical media matters more than ever in the streaming age. Man, you said it, Simon. Back in April, Disney in the UK released the film Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker across DVD, Blu-ray, and 4K Ultra HD platforms. The discs sold well, as you'd expect. But in something of a surprise, just days after they'd gone on sale, the studio announced the film was heading to Disney Plus streaming service early. Now, there's a whole host of reasons why Disney is sending films to Disney Plus earlier than planned that I looked at in the article Disney Plus and its pipeline problem. But this nonetheless felt like the old days of buying a DVD for a film only for the special edition to be announced straight after, the old double dip. That the original disc release had been diluted somewhat. Certainly my Twitter feed had one or two people understandably grumbling that they'd bought the film and wouldn't have snapped it up so quickly if they'd known Disney's plans. In this case, though, the studio moving people away from physical media rather than towards a second purchase. For Disney is, as I'd be if I'd spent billions on something, all in on Disney Plus. As a consequence, there is a decreasing focus on physical media from the studio. Don't look for individual 4K releases of most of the Star Wars and Pixar catalog in the UK, for instance. I also think Disney Plus is an excellent service. I do too, by the way. I think it's an excellent service. Countering that, once we went into lockdown, it became known that Disney, along with Netflix, Amazon Prime, and the BBC iPlayer service, was lowering the bit rate of its streams. The quality was being taken down to accommodate the surge in web traffic caused by most of us being at home. In these lockdown times, sales of physical disc players have been on the increase as people find they don't want films and TV shows hogging their devices and internet lines. Whether that's sustainable remains to be seen. But also, there remains something really special and reliable about the age-old physical releases. That, assuming you store your discs properly and keep them in decent nick. I love that. Decent nick. That's a UK term I've never heard before, but I keep all of my discs in decent nick. You're never going to have a problem of buffering, waiting for an internet line, of edits being made to newer releases, and of someone in an office thousands of miles away reducing the quality of your film's picture quality at the touch of a button. In the last month alone, there have been stories of an edited version of Back to the Future 2 playing on Netflix. You see, I do think about how I organize these shows. That Netflix change after admitting the wrong version had been uploaded to its service, and of Daryl Hannah being digitally altered in Splash to avoid offending families. It strikes me that these are the alterations we know about and have only come to light because they've been clumsily done and are in well-known films. Who can say they have a confidence that no other films that perhaps aren't as high profile aren't being quietly edited or being suppressed altogether like Ken Russell's The Devils? Furthermore, I become slightly perturbed at the picture quality of some of the films on Netflix in particular. Loading up City Slickers the other week, I was staggered to find it was presented in 4:3, edited for television ratio, the curse of pan and scan. Let me throw in here that my own film, Free Enterprise, is not available other than in 4:3, which drives me up a wall. And it's an old version of the movie that was done in '99 not a new picture transfer. It's not the new sound mix is not there like we did in 2006. It feels like the worst possible version of the film that is one most people have access to. The print of RoboCop it had sourced when it was on the UK service was all over the shop as well. The director's cut had been uploaded in the UK, and when it cut to the new footage, the quality fell through the floor. Contrast that with the recent Arrow Blu-ray release, and the difference feels pretty seismic. By the way, the Arrow Blu-ray box set is amazing. Let me see if, well, might be over there. I don't know. Hang on. Uh-oh. Everything's falling. Well, that wasn't worth doing, but actually it was worth doing because I'd just like to show you that Arrow put this out, this beautiful box set and different versions of the movie. It comes with booklets and all kinds of stuff in it, and in this one of these beautiful like matte finish boxes. But most importantly, the transfer of RoboCop is, I think, the best ever done. Thank you, Arrow. And after all, we as film fans, all we really want are the best versions of the film. This, then, is the clutch of problems that goes to the variance in quality we're getting from our streaming services. I say that as someone who's generally very impressed with them, and I certainly am a partaker of the convenience that they offer. I'm glad that streaming and on-demand services exist. Me too. What I am not glad about is the amount they've eroded, along with piracy, if we're being blunt, the market for physical media. And in turn, the standards that physical media sets. Physical media has had problems over the years, but there feels at least a base level to a disc release now. Still, it's little secret that the combined sales of DVDs, Blu-rays, and 4K discs have been in decline for years. Physical sales peaked in the mid-2000s and have been on a downward curve ever since. That is absolutely true. 10 to 15% a year declining. That's a huge decline. Last year, physical media sales were only around $4 billion, which might seem like a lot, but compared to the heyday, it's not a whole lot at all. Whereas revenue from streaming has shot through the roof. As a consequence, studios have been less inclined to invest in their discs, and the standard studio release is a barren affair. But even so, you have a reasonable expectation of a cut of a film that won't change, that's properly presented in the correct aspect ratio, that'll play every time you want it to play. Standards were such that I remember when Warner Brothers delayed the release of John Carpenter's The Ward on disc, for instance, by many months because it discovered after manufacturing the disc it was incorrectly framed. You generally get something radical called a refund if that's not the case. Furthermore, whilst we're now seeing streaming services slowly embrace extra features, it's notably that Disney saved its extensive making of Frozen 2 for a Disney Plus series. That the fuel for this was always physical media, and we've got Laserdisc to thank going back in film history. Sadly, extras became for a while collateral in the studio's land grab of digital sales. Remember the releases where the extra features weren't all on the discs, but were on the likes of iTunes instead? The one thing that physical media guarantees is availability, so that the film you bought and want to watch will always be available to you to do so. I remember being a little bemused at the excitement when Back to the Future was first added to Netflix, leading to no shortage of articles being written about the 3 films being added to one service. But also, I'd wager these articles were primarily read and written by people who had at least one copy of the trilogy already on their shelf. I'm not being piddly about that. I think it's lopsided. I wish the excitement was for a physical, permanent release of the film rather than a streaming service edition that admittedly means I don't have to get off my backside and fetch the disc. Yet ultimately, the reason I feel physical media is very much worth fighting for above all else is its permanence. Earlier this week, I penned a piece looking at the lack of True Lies and The Abyss on a majority of streaming services, and indeed on Blu-ray and 4K. There's still a gigantic number of films that simply aren't available on demand at all. And the main streamers, the Netflixes, the Amazons, sometimes need to take films off their streaming service to bring in fresh editions as well. That choice, whilst often overwhelming, is actually surprisingly small. Meanwhile, that True Lies DVD, and this is a huge mainstream film, remember, remains on my shelf whenever I want it. It's not perfect, but it's there. Same with my DVD of The Abyss. The Abyss has never come out on Blu-ray or 4K. What the hell? The same goes for the thousands, perhaps even tens of thousands of catalog titles that aren't even on the radar of streaming services. They may not exist online, but they exist physically somewhere. It's worth adding, too, that even if you get a film on demand, who remembers the Flickster debacle? There's a small print that means it can be taken away. Nobody to date has tried to remove my Blu-ray of Geostorm from my home, however. Physical film media is, in my view, incredibly important. And it's just the kind of thing that's missed as soon as it's gone. Appreciating there's still a list of terms and conditions at the start of each disc or video is, for all intents and purposes, yours, insulated from corporate meddling and leaving you safe in the knowledge that as long as you have a player and a telly, you don't even need your internet switched on to watch the disc in question. One further thing, a huge salute to the third-party companies who are doing what the studios aren't. Picking up the rights to titles and delivering genuine quality extras-packed special editions. Oftentimes, it's a labor of love for titles that'll do well to sell 1,000 copies. But that work will still exist decades down the line, and I think that matters. Well, I think it matters too. The problem is, when it comes to things like transfers, doing a transfer of an actual film that exists as a film print is prohibitively expensive. It's not like vinyl, where you can go press heavy gauge vinyl, and it's a lot cheaper. If you want to transfer a movie and do a proper 4K release, a proper negative cleanup, you're looking at $100,000. Now, can you do it cheaper? Sure. But $100,000 is a lot of money, and you have to understand, where's that money going to go? How are you going to make that money back? People ask me every single day for a Blu-ray of Free Enterprise. I have to come up with the money. I don't own the negative, so I can't necessarily crowdfund to go do something like that. I'd like to. I'd like to do a lot to that film before I put it out on 4K. Do a final definitive cut of it, and then put it out. But it costs money. Now, the thing is, companies like Arrow, they know with sets like this, they make them limited edition. So not only are these the best versions of the movie that you're going to get, but they're also collectible and desirable, and there's not a lot of them out there. So again, I collect physical media. Look, it's habitual. I'm celebrating not only the 40th anniversary of The Empire Strikes Back, but May also marks the 40th anniversary of my first my first movie. When I say physical media, I had lots of records before that, or cassette tapes. But 40 years ago, I don't have it anymore, but I bought the first VHS release of John Carpenter's Halloween on VHS, and it was on Meta before it became Media Home Entertainment. I've talked about it before. Meta was Charlie Band's first wife, and he started Media Home Entertainment. So it's been 40 years. I've been buying physical media for 40 years. Now, over that time, my collections have morphed, and now I'm only buying Blu-rays and Blu-rays and 4Ks. And 4K discs are the best versions of movies that have ever been released to the home market, as long as you get versions. And the great thing is, to create real 4K masters, which they want moving forward, the studios have had to go in and redo old transfers. So in the case of when you get an Alien, or you get a Die Hard, or you get a Matrix, or you get Blade Runner, the 4K transfers, when done properly, when they spend the money, are glorious. The promise of real home theater is available. You have a 4K disc of something, and you watch it, and you have a big home theater system. That's it. That's the promise of home theater. You can't do any better unless, IMAX is going to move into doing home theaters. I don't know what that means. You have to build a barn. I would do it if I had the place, and if I had the real estate and the money, I would certainly put up an IMAX theater in my backyard if I could, because who wouldn't? But I think physical media is really important. But now it's really interesting. So I was, in preparation for this, I started finding, I was just did a cursory bopping around the old internet to see, what I could find in terms of attitudes, because I know that one of the things about collecting in physical media is that there are people that aren't into it. They don't like to collect. They want to get rid of everything. My problem with that is, like this article pointed out, anyone who watched the long night streaming, it was terrible. Streaming does not do well with true blacks and things like that. It artifacts, blooms. I mean, there's all kinds of problems. But I found another article. It was written by Devendra Hardawar. Devendra Hardawar. And I like the name Devendra, actually. It's a great name. Anyway, I found this on Engadget, written on May 4th. Why I Caved and Finally Bought a Blu-ray Player. Again, on Engadget by Devendra Hardawar. And it's a dead format, but one I still love. How is it a dead format? But okay. Devendra writes, I didn't need a 4K Blu-ray player. Not really. For one, I've written extensively that the platform is pretty much dead in the water since it launched in 2016. I think you're a little wrong about that. And then there's the fact I already have an Xbox One X for playing 4K Blu-ray discs. Yet, as the days blurred into weeks and perhaps months under quarantine, I felt like that business cat meme. I should buy a 4K Blu-ray player. Truth is, I've always hated dealing with the Xbox One X's slow interface for playing discs, and I never warmed up to using the gamepad as a controller. Sure, I could have picked up an Xbox Media remote, but really, I wanted a complete solution to my 4K disc woes. So even though my media center is already overcrowded with the aforementioned Xbox One X, along with a PS4 Pro, Apple TV, Denon receiver, and a Switch dock awkwardly wedged in, I started looking at a standalone 4K Blu-ray players in earnest over the past year. Cost was one issue that held me back early on. While normal Blu-ray players have been incredibly cheap for some time, often as well as under $100, their 4K siblings were going for around $300. I couldn't justify that price when the $499 Xbox One X played the same discs and was already hooked up to my entertainment system. Okay, laziness was a factor too, but throughout 2019, I noticed that 4K players were dropping closer to $200 and sometimes less. And then there's the fact that the Xbox One X isn't the most fully featured 4K Blu-ray player around. For one, it doesn't support Dolby Vision HDR. While Microsoft was able to patch in Dolby Atmos support along the Xbox One lineup, Dolby's HDR tech isn't available anywhere outside of the Netflix app. That wasn't a problem for me early on when 4K Blu-ray discs offered Dolby Vision, but now that it's popping up more frequently, I began to feel like I was missing out. I wasn't about to live with a subpar John Wick 3 viewing experience. Good for you. Then the COVID-19 pandemic happened. My wife and I found ourselves trapped in a cramped Brooklyn apartment with a restless 18-month-old. At the end of that day, all we wanted was easy entertainment before you had to wake up and relive the insanity of the coronavirus times again. Sure, there's tons of stuff to watch on Netflix and Hulu, but we've also got a huge library of Blu-rays, 4K and HD alike, that we love revisiting. And after suffering through yet another inexplicable Xbox One X crash while playing a movie, I decided it was time to make the jump. My research eventually led to Sony 4K's Blu-ray lineup, specifically the UBP X800M2. It's a bit pricey, but I managed to save a bit by picking up a refurbished model. It handles Dolby Vision well, though sometimes I need to manually select it in the disc's menu, and it does a great job of up-converting HD Blu-ray discs to 4K. Its remote is simple and easy to use, and as a bonus, it also supports high-resolution SACD and DVD audio, two other niche formats I couldn't help but support over the last 2 decades. Sigh. From the moment I popped in John Wick 3, I knew I made the right decision. The movie started up faster than anything did on my Xbox One X, and after a bit of fiddling with the settings, the player also delivered a far better-looking 4K Blu-ray experience. The bright neon lights of Manhattan danced together with the dark, rain-slick city streets effortlessly, and thanks to Dolby Vision's ability to handle its metadata dynamically, essentially letting it remap its HDR tuning for every single scene, which is the benefit of Dolby Vision, everything just popped a bit more compared to normal HDR10 footage. HDR10 has the advantage of being an open source format, but it handles metadata in a static way, which could lead to artifacts on some TVs. Since I've picked up the Sony player, I've found myself enjoying the process of picking out a Blu-ray from our library a lot more. As a cinephile and someone who will never trust streaming services entirely, even if I'm buying a movie digitally, I'll always have a special place in my heart for physical media. These discs are important to me, so I might as well treat them to a special player of their very own. Damn right you should. Damn right. So thanks to that, Devindra. I appreciated your article, and thanks for writing it. Then I came across a article that was on Watch Mojo. Not something I necessarily look at a lot, but I figured since I'm going down the rabbit hole, why don't I'll share it with you. This was dated April 10th, 2018. The Real Reason Why Physical Media is Dead by Mike Patel. HD, Blu-ray, 4K, Ultra HD Blu-ray, holy shit, or simply blah, blah, blah. Here's the honest truth for most people. It doesn't really matter how good something can look. I said the same thing in my Film Free Enterprise. Sure, they'll take it, but what really matters most is how convenient and effortlessly they can absorb it. 4K versus OK. There is an increasingly mounting wall separating those who will go through the relative tediousness of things like opening a case, taking a disc out of said case, opening the disc drive, and sitting through unskippable previews and menus, and those who will just hit stream at a much lower quality without getting off the couch. First of all, those who hit stream without caring about quality are not the people that physical media is directed to. And I understand, as a Laserdisc consumer from early on, I understand Laserdiscs were a niche market. And physical media, I understand it's going to be a niche market again, just like Laserdiscs were. I get it. Most people don't care. But if you really do care about the cinema experience, it is now cheaper than ever to get yourself a home theater system, a decent screen, and, in the comfort of your own home or perhaps your bedroom, you can provide a pretty great experience watching movies with surround sound, with a subwoofer, and not having those blacks that look like they're a puddle of water on your screen. Physical stuff is a drag, says this article. This is why YouTube and Netflix and other streaming options dominate as our entertainment platforms of choice, even for users before 4K who don't have the monthly bandwidth for the top resolution in their downloads. If you're a millennial or Generation Z, this is, of course, preaching to the choir. Let me tell you something. Even the feel of this box, it's got that matte finish. I mean, you pick this up, you put it in your hands. This just feels good. It feels substantial. It makes me happy to pick this up. And how many things make you happy just by picking them up? Babies, your girlfriend's boobs, I mean, whatever. Picking stuff up and having them in your hands and having a rush. This is worth owning just to have it as an artifact of the movie. Some people put posters on their wall. I do that too, but to have this, and if something makes you happy, I mean, hey, isn't that something? But I get it. Physical stuff is not a drag, not if you like it. I also understand that we're living in a constantly changing world. And I understand Marie Kondo, or whatever her name is, getting rid of all your stuff, that could be a good thing too. I think you're weighted down by your stuff. I certainly feel weighted down by this. Every time I move, I feel like I turn into Hulk Hogan because I have to lift so many boxes of books. Anyway, preaching to the choir. This isn't confined to consuming films and television. Watching folks play video games is a legit thing. It's mainstream. That is, instead of playing those video games for ourselves. This would sound like some sort of witchcraft or blasphemy years ago, but here we are. Who can have bothered with keeping up to date, ripping a game or tweaking settings, having folks over to play games? Weak sauce. If you want to play so bad, you just meet up online and forego the effort, or pants. Whatever is the path of least resistance is the one most people will take most of the time. Look, I agree with that. There are times I was literally sitting in bed ready to watch Excalibur with Elizabeth, and I'm like, I've been moving my physical discs around. They're no longer alphabetized. I'm like, I don't know where my Excalibur disc is. Luckily, I was able to find it because it still was relatively close to where it was supposed to be. But my first impulse was just to go click, click. So yeah, I decided to I found my disc, but I was trying to find it. And by the way, Excalibur, you could only buy it. You could only rent it. There was nobody streaming Excalibur. Maybe there is on some pirate site, but there wasn't. So luckily I found my disc, and it would look better anyway. Just look at the turn of century progression in terms of consuming Hollywood moving pictures. Yes, they used to call them that, silly primitives. When we went from VHS to DVD in 1997, it was touted for its mind-blowing quality. Heck, the DVD picture quality was previewed on VHS tapes through showing explosions. One had to wonder how you could show one thing on another thing that is apparently so archaic. Truth is, it didn't matter if it was the exact same quality as its predecessor. A DVD did not have to be tediously and slowly rewound or fast-forwarded. It could be played in small mobile players on your PC and was much smaller for packing and transporting. You could carry dozens of films with you on a trip in the same case you carried your music CDs in. Remember those? It was convenient, and we ate it up like a greasy buffet having a half-off special. That is true. Looks amazing, but can't be bothered to leave the couch. When Blu-ray arrived just over a decade later in 2008, it was also touted as the biggest game changer ever, assuming you had the hardware to take advantage of the benefits. It murdered the competition, HD DVD, because it was playable on the PlayStation 3 console, which was, you guessed it, convenient. Regardless, its adoption was and continues to be a relative fraction of what DVD was. Compared to what came before, it was not more convenient, it was more pretty. The cost-to-benefit ratio ain't for everyone. Meanwhile, streaming flew by like it entered hyperspace and stabbed video rental stores such as Blockbuster while they kept their heads in the sand, exposing their bodies for said stabbing. Who could be bothered with driving to a store, going to a counter, and having to gasp, return it? Your grandfather, that's who. Who hasn't chosen to watch something else online at a shamefully lower resolution rather than wait for the bigger download or go to that physical media route or get their actual bums to a movie theater? Speaking of which, fewer and fewer people go to the movie these days for that very reason. The spectacle and social aspect has to merit the effort. Sure, if you want to avoid spoilers or have a hot date, it's more worthy of your time, but even that is probably based on avoiding the creep factor in inviting someone home early on. But more importantly, the need to tidy up your living space, that is not convenient. It's like settling for craft dinner, we often make compromises. So here we are, where things get prettier every day. But ultimately, most of us will flow like water to the first thing that we drift upon as long as it satisfies us with the least effort used up. It certainly applies to things like photography as well. Most of the time, our cell phone cameras with internal memory are good enough, not to mention extremely convenient as they are on hand and can upload on the fly, even if we have a big bulky DSLR in a bag somewhere that takes much more impressive skills. Not into TV, films, or video games? Just download a good book to read or a song to listen to. It's so deliciously convenient. There will always be two tiers, those who prefer the best your senses can get, think Blu-ray, and those who are good with what's at hand. But hey, no judgment, merely an observation that there are more and more of only one of those camps as the days go by. We also have less room for stuff, especially as we binge more and more. So that article, all of that's true. I believe that. I do. I just don't like it. I don't like it. I like physical media, and I understand that part of it's habitual. I mean, most of my life, literally now, I've been buying physical media. And there's something comforting about it. I love movies so much, movies and books and comics. The things that I love, when you can now get the best representation of that thing, I want that thing. Now, I've often thought about how many more times in my life that I'm alive on this planet Earth am I going to watch RoboCop? I've probably seen this movie 30 or 40 times in my life. How many more times am I going to watch it? Aren't there a lot of movies I haven't seen? Absolutely. There's a lot of movies I still haven't seen at all. There's a lot of shows I haven't seen. There's a lot of things I want to get back to. But when this copy of RoboCop came out, it's the best copy of RoboCop that's existed so far. So I had to get it. I had to have it. I had to know that I had it. I have a comfort level. Sometimes it's just enough to know that they're there. Now, is that rational? Probably not. Is it pragmatic? Certainly not. But it makes me happy. I get to anticipate that Arrow is releasing it. I wonder, what's the cover gonna look like? I mean, this is like new artwork. How's the box gonna feel? On the back, look, it's got the OCP logo. Everything about this appeals to me. I just like it. And I also know it's the best version of the movie that exists. So let's say I live to my 90s and I still have all of my physical media, and somebody comes to my house, like maybe a great grandkid or something, and says, great grandpa, have you ever heard of RoboCop from the 80s? I can pull it off the shelf and go, listen, I don't care what your mother says. We can watch it. I've got the uncut, unrated director's cut. And I think that's important. And it keeps me happy. And how many things do that? I know some people would say, but does it really, Rob? Does it really keep you happy? I would say, yes. Yes, it does. It keeps me happy. So there you go. That's what I want to talk about today. Let's see what you guys have to say. I know that there's a lot of people have things to say, so wait, let's jump into that before I get to today's letters. Timbula the Spider Monkey sent in a tip yesterday and said, awesome shirt today, Rob. The 4 that I ordered are on their way. I was wearing my Cosmo Navy shirt from Space Battleship Yamato yesterday. So Tim, there you go. And Tim also says, my last tip yesterday was about the Cosmo Navy shirt you had on. I sent it just as you were finishing, and I thought you'd get it on whining about movies. Oh, well, here, have some more bounce. I'm sure whatever shirt you have on today is also great. Well, this is a Super 7 shirt with Japanese monsters on it. Peter sends in a tip. Well, thank you, Peter. I appreciate that very much. Perhaps you do know something about movies. I'm glad I came across your channel. Well, I should say, so this is kind of funny. So in the last couple of days, I have been getting ripped on by many of the hashtag release the Snyder Cut people. And a lot of them have been pointing out that I don't know what I was talking about, that I was one of those people that said it's only an assembly cut and it's never going to come out and blah, 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 and they're throwing it in my face. And I've been getting that a lot. Well, thanks to Brian Eng, who wrote in a letter, Brian Eng writes this today. Hi, Rob. I had to see if you predicted HBO Max resurrecting the Snyder Cut. So I dug back almost exactly 6 months ago. On November 24th, Robservations number 282 at 1 hour, 2 minutes, and 42 seconds. You said the only way the Snyder Cut would happen would be if HBO Max paid for it. You were just confused by all the computations on how it'd be worth it and all the contractual wrangling. You also said Joss Whedon might be offended. 2 things also struck me on the rewatch. Less importantly, the Snyder Cut will have Iris West. More importantly, you said you watched the entire making of the Bonfire of the Vanities. Do you have any stories to tell? Was Bruce Willis really a jerk? Well, I say that, Peter. First of all, thanks for supporting the channel. But I thought that was sort of funny. Like, I don't think I know everything. I'm not some Hollywood oracle of Delphi, moved into Hollywood, I guess. I will say that I have been a student. I mean, how does anybody learn anything? You are a student. I've been a student of the business of Hollywood for a long time. I've been just as interested in the machinations of how things work in Hollywood as I am with making movies and actually working in Hollywood. But having worked in home video for 8 years, from 1980 to 1988, and watching the evolution of home video, going from something everyone talked about, home video is going to spell the doom of Hollywood, and I thought to myself, even as a 13-year-old, I'm like, no, you know what it's going to do is it's going to turn people into movie fanatics, because you can get movies that you didn't have access to before and watch them over and over again and study them. And that's exactly what happened. Movies became different. It certainly changed. But so I'm when I am talking about what I think is going to happen, I would say, I mean, I don't have a doctorate in communications, or I don't have a PhD in movie making or the business of Hollywood, but I spend a lot of my time, as I have most of my life, studying how movies are made and the business of movies. So the whole thing about the Snyder Cut I thought was interesting because it did exist. And if you think about things in that realm, and Warner Brothers is a studio, the one studio where you could go to and you can say, look, you have done different versions of movies, you've released different things, and even with Zack Snyder especially, you've released 3 versions of Watchmen. there are different things Warner Brothers has done over the years to make something like a Snyder Cut something. Let's talk about Blade Runner. You know, when Warner Brothers allowed them, when Charlie de Lauzirika was making his documentary Dangerous Days, Warner Brothers released 5 different versions of Blade Runner in a box set, put them all together. It was not shying away from the fact that these versions of the movie existed. So the one studio that I could have seen the Snyder Cut coming out from is Warner Brothers. By the way, Andre, the impresario over at Midnight's Edge, dropped a pretty interesting video that was well researched and very much worth watching. And it's only like 15 minutes long on the Snyder Cut. I don't know if he dropped it yesterday or in the last day or two, but it's probably at the top of their channel. And yeah, before people get mad at me, I like the people over at Midnight's Edge, and I like Andre a great deal, and I like when he drops videos. They're always worth watching. And whether he's 100% right or not, he does contextualize everything that is known about the Snyder Cut so far and that whole experience of what was Justice League. So I if you're interested, I would recommend watching the Midnight's Edge video that Andre dropped on the Snyder Cut. I thought it was pretty good. Senor Ashish sends in a tip and said, everyone's complaining about Back to the Future Part 2 being slightly edited on Netflix. Not for me. I have the unaltered physical media copy of the film on Blu-ray. Yeah, you know, I mean, obviously that's what even got me thinking about this topic for today. But yeah, I do too, and I can't wait to get Back to the Future on 4K. Even Back to the Future, when it was first released, I think it was on Blu-ray, they didn't have the right aspect ratio. They had to redo it or something. But yeah, if you have a good version of the film on Blu-ray, what's important, what I think is, and I've watched this happen, the studios, all of their home video divisions have been gutted. There were really amazing people like George Feltenstein, who, I mean, I had met him back when I was working in the 80s at Silver Platters. He came in when I was Laser Bob, the laser disc manager of the 3-store Silver Platter, what was a 3-store chain at the time. And all of those people are gone. So many of the people at the studios now that are overseeing their catalog titles, they just don't know. They don't know what's available. They don't know what's out there. They don't know what are the differences between various versions of movies. And because they got rid of all those people, which is unfortunate because in the age of streaming, a lot more things like this Back to the Future thing is going to happen. Willow's here. Willow says, did you get around to watching Noah Hawley's feature debut, Lucy in the Sky? I skipped out on it after seeing a lot of bad reviews. However, I do think that the complaints over the film not depicting Portman's character wearing adult diapers were dumb. I have not, and I really want to see this. Noah Hawley, who obviously gave us Legion and worked on the Fargo TV series, who was maybe going to give us a Star Trek movie, he directed a film called Lucy in the Sky, which was based on a true story about these astronauts, a woman who basically, an astronaut who comes back to Earth, who's involved in an affair with another astronaut, who basically became, let's call it, untethered from reality. I have not seen it. I really want to see it. I'll watch anything space related. And I think that I was really interested in seeing how he dealt with the idea that when you leave the bonds of our earthly bonds, our terrestrial bonds, and go into space, it must do something to your perception of the universe. Things must change for you. And one of my favorite books I've ever read, and I don't even remember if it was a particularly great book, but it's by Dan Simmons. And Dan Simmons is one of my favorite writers. As a matter of fact, you know what? I'm going to grab the book. So this version of Phases of Gravity, talk about physical media. So this is a slip-cased version. I mean, who doesn't love having books like this? So this is, I don't even remember where I got this, to be honest. This first edition of Phases of Gravity is limited to 250 copies and signed by the author, of which this is number 212. Really, the only autographs I collect are authors. This book is a fictional book. It's about an astronaut who lands on the moon, and when he comes back to Earth and he's a father and has to live out the rest of his days, he wonders, how do you as a man who, when you are relatively young, accomplished the greatest thing that you've ever accomplished, which is going to the moon, how do you then live out the rest of your days knowing that nothing you do afterwards will measure up? I mean, there's a lot more going on, but I love that idea. And I love this idea that because, I've always wanted to be an astronaut my whole life. I was one of those kids. But I think that it's a fascinating book. And, maybe I'm remembering in my mind being better than it was, but I really love this book, and I should read it again. That's the beauty of having physical media. That's the beauty of having books on your shelf. So there you go. You know what? Now I just want to look and see, how old is this book? I don't even remember. When was this book? When did it come out? This book came out, wow, in 1989. So I read this book when it came out 31 years ago. Well, how cool is it I still have it? There you go. Physical media. Royce Freeman sends in a super chat and says, if a cast or crew member decides after the movie is released that they no longer want their name on it and they have signed a release, what recourse do they have? That's a good question. I really don't think that they do have a recourse on it because they worked on the movie. Other people have contracts like the DGA. There's that whole Alan Smithy thing, but that's a really good question. And if they've signed a release, I just don't think that they do have a recourse on it. And I've never heard of that, actually. But they worked on the movie. I mean, unless I would imagine the response would be, okay, I worked on your movie, I want my name taken off of the film, then they can pay to have that done. They can pay to have that done. I would say that you accepted the job, you accepted payment, you worked on the film, and if you decide you don't like it when it comes out, I don't know. I think that's the risk. It's part of the risk you take, but I've never heard of anybody wanting to do that. But I think the only way you should entertain that thought is to say there's a lot of money involved. I mean, it costs us money to put your name on the movie. And if you're willing to do what it takes to, if the movie hasn't come out on home video yet or you haven't sold it to streaming, then it's still possible, but that ship has sailed. And if you didn't want your name on the movie, shouldn't you have known that by day 2 of filming and you could have quit the film? I'll tell you a funny story. I've said her name before, but I won't say her name now. But I'll say her name because she's in. So Sheena Shea, who is on Vanderpump Rules, she was in an episode that I directed of Femme Fatales called The Hot House. That was it was the first episode of the second season. I liked her, and in a subsequent episode, the series finale I directed, Libra, I wanted to bring her character back. So we had her character come back, and she had a burnt face. It was cool, like Two-Face. Well, when she got onto Vanderpump Rules, I was contacted by her because there was clips of her on my director's reel that I had posted somewhere. And she contacted me, and she said, please, I really don't want to promote this other part of my life. I've moved on in my career now, so would you please refrain from using my likeness in your director's reel? Now, at the time, when we were making Femme Fatales, I thought it was cool that she came back and she was fun to work with and she did a good job. And I was like, that's pretty cool. Like, I went to bat for her to bring her character back onto a second episode for no other reason than it was cool in a fight. I really liked shooting this fight scene, and she gets her face put down on a thing and on a burner on a stove and gets her face burned. And I'm like, wouldn't it be cool to bring her back? And then she, years later, she's like, well, I've moved on with Mike. I'm like, you know what? It really pissed me off because own it. You were certainly happy to be in the episode and come back and do a second episode. And later in life, I've always hated that. You should own your professional choices. And if you don't, Well, what does that say to all the other people that you work with, the cast, the crew, the director? What does that say to them? Oh, I've moved on with my career, so hey, the work you've done doesn't matter anymore. Please bend to my wishes. I didn't dig that. Now, I don't bear her any ill will. I understand that she's trying to manage her career and, being on a Cinemax show that aired for like every day for 4 or 5 years or something. Whatever. You might not like that it was a Skinemax show that aired late night, but it's still fun, But still, it was like when I got that, I felt kind of hurt, to be honest, that she told me that she didn't want a clip from that in. I mean, how many times do you get to shoot a fight scene between two girls in a kitchen where they're smashing each other with pots and pans? I mean, I was pretty proud of that, but okay. So yeah, you know what? If they no longer want their name on it, I would say that's too bad. Ultimately. David Tapia sends in a super chat and says, likelihood will get Snyder cut on physical media. Well, it is HBO and Warner Brothers. I would say it probably pretty high. Zack Snyder has always been good about physical media. Look at his 3 versions of Watchmen. I would love that. By the way, I would love to make a documentary about the entire Snyder Cut controversy. So, hey, if anyone wants to know my credentials, I've worked for Warner Brothers before. I made a 3-hour documentary on the making of Superman Returns. But you can look at my latest work. Oh, the Blu-ray of The Hills Run Red, ladies and gentlemen. A movie I actually produced, but also with Dave Parker, the director. Dave Parker and I produced 6.5 hours of brand new special features that are available from Scream Factory on June 16th. Come on, how many YouTubers can say that? You can get it at shoutfactory.com, or you can pre-order it on Amazon. Hey, there you go. How cool is that? I think it's pretty cool. So anyway, there you go. Anonymous sends in a tip and says, speaking of physical media, are there any methods or machines you'd recommend for maintaining, cleaning, and repairing Blu-ray and 4K discs? Honestly, I don't, because I've never had the need. I've never touched a 4K disc. I only touch the outside. My discs don't even have fingerprints on them. I don't know. Maintaining, cleaning, and repairing. I don't know why you would. I think just proper care. I don't know, but I don't think anybody does that. But that's an interesting question. Yeah. Amazing. Dieter's here. Dieter, my Deutschland angel, or would you say angel from Deutschland? Kind of angel from Deutschland. You'd have to sing it like Angel of Harlem from U2, right? Dieter, I've got videos. I'm going to put up Dieter's bad review of Free Enterprise on the channel, by the way. Dieter says, Rob, your German angel here. Your Deutschland angel. Since your topic is physical media, I just wanted to inform you our Crash 4K sets are on their way. Oh my God. I can't wait to get that Crash 4K disc. So only 2 things are missing. Your Akira 4K and our exchange discs for Rollerball. And then I can get your package ready to ship. I love that. I don't know how long those exchange discs for Rollerball will take. But, by the time you get all that stuff, I'll have a package to send back to you as well, including a signed Hills Run Red, a signed Cody Banks, and, of course, the signed Bitch Slap. Royce Freeman sends in a super chat and says, the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre was up-res from 16mm 35 and had a grainy look on VHS, but when they restored it to 4K, it looked better. Thoughts? The VHS is how we remember it. Well, when you have 4K, there's so much more latitude now in terms of transfer technology. I mean, a lot of time, I don't like to bleed out the grain, but you can get a lot more out of film. Like VHS, remember, you're looking at VHS was maybe 225 lines of resolution or something. VHS was terrible. And, just like Blu-ray is, 6 times better than DVD? And 4K is how many times better than that? I mean, look, I'll tell you, the resolution for just things I've worked on. It's if you want to watch a widescreen Blu-ray presentation, it's what is it? It's 2048 by 858. That's 239 to 1. And Blu-ray or 4K is 2096 by or pardon me, 4096 by 1716. So think about that. That's I mean, the resolution that we're getting compared to what VHS was is insanely. It's so much better. So I would imagine Texas Chainsaw, as long as I don't like when there's a lot of digital alterations done. I can't stand getting rid of grain, because what you're doing is you're basically blurring the image, so to speak. The sharpness is being taken out of it. Look, transfer technology is so great now, which is it's more imperative than ever to have colorists who know what they're doing. So, so I think that, yeah, I mean, I'd love to see a version of it, because remember, we're finally seeing movies, if they're done correctly, the way they're meant to be seen, even photochemically, when they preserve them at 4K. Like, you look at Die Hard, the new 4K Die Hard, or you look at The Matrix, they look wonderful, and you really get that sense of physicality from them, the photochemical nature. Dave's Golden Duck sends in a super chat and says, today is 30 years since Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles opened, which I own on VHS and DVD. Wow, that's crazy. That is crazy. The first Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, we were celebrating it. I did a whole show about it, actually. It's pretty good. I'm a fan of that first Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle movies. Mukbang sends in a super chat and says, thanks for not canceling super chat after its tech issues. I still don't know what the super chat issues are. Like, I'm looking right now, right? I'm looking at super chat revenue on this show on my YouTube studio. It's not showing up. 0. It is showing 0 right now. Your super chats that you just sent. Now, if I refresh, if I go into refresh, let's see. We'll see if it refreshed or not. Okay, it did refresh. But something really strange has been going on with YouTube. It's very weird. It's very frustrating. By the way, I do have some super chats from a couple days ago I'm going to read. But it's incredibly frustrating. You know, if people want to support the channel, which is great, and you want them to, obviously. But, I mean, the whole point of supporting the channel is to interact with you live and all that. And it drives me crazy. So I didn't cancel it, but see, I don't do the kind of volume that John does. I mean, John or other bigger channels, and it's really frustrating. I don't know what's going on with YouTube. I read somewhere that somebody was trying to launder money through super chats, which I'm like, YouTube takes so much from super chats. Like, why would you want to launder money through it? I mean, I guess if there's a way to do it, you can. I don't know. But that they wanted to get rid of it, I don't know. Could be a rumor. I have no idea. Who knows? Brandon Sheehy sends in a super chat and says, your thoughts on Red Letter Media's review of Star Trek Picard. Mr. Plinkett came back and reviewed. I loved it. I think the beginning was a little long-winded. I get what they were doing. But I thought the review was, I mean, there was just enough boiling rage in it. And, you know, Mike, who does those, he's very smart. And he really knows his Star Trek. He really knows. I've loved those guys. I first discovered Plinkett's Generations review. What has it been, like 10 years now? Over 10 years or something? I couldn't believe it when I read that review or watched that review. I'm like, oh, he gets it. He totally gets me. And I think it was great. And that moment at the end, when it starts with the train set metaphor, and then he moves in, hit it, Johnny, and they show Star Trek, and then it hard cuts to Picard. That's all you need to know. It's very, very damning. And I thought it was spot on. I loved it. Loved it. Jason S. sends in a tip and says, I've been hearing from sources close to production that say because of Ezra Miller's choking a woman incident, that Ezra will be digitally replaced with a different actor in the Snyder Cut. How do you think audiences will react? P.S. Just kidding. Never take as truth articles that rely on anonymous sources. Though, do you think the studio and Snyder will just ignore the Ezra incident like it never happened? Or just not have Ezra do anything to promote the new cut of the movie? You know what? I love Ezra Miller. I loved all of his performances. I don't know everything that happened on that case. Obviously, it was unfortunate. It was not good judgment on his part. But, and you know, again, people make mistakes all the time. And are we going to, if reparations were made and apologies are made and things happen, does he deserve to be? Does his performance in Justice League have anything to do with what happened at that place? It was in Iceland, I think, or yeah, in Iceland. I would not want to cancel him. I don't plan on getting rid of my hot toy of the Flash, of Ezra Miller's The Flash. So, no, I hope not. I mean, I hope everything stays the same. World's Greatest Detective send in a super chat and says, Rob, are absolute editions an endangered species? I love my absolute editions of Long Halloween, Watchmen, V for Vendetta, and Kingdom Come. What are your top 5 absolute editions? By the way, halfway through my Star Trek letter. Well, first of all, thanks for supporting the channel. I can't wait to read the Star Trek letter. I love my Sandman absolute editions. Love my Sandman. They're number 1. All of my Sandman absolute editions and my Death absolute edition, number 1. Watchmen's probably number 2. The Dark Knight. I mean, let's see, just right here. You know, I turn up. Oh, you know what? I like my Authority absolute editions. Those are good. As I'm looking down here, Christ on Infinite Earths. I love Christ on Infinite Earths. Absolute Batman. Absolute JLA versus Avengers. I love that. That's a tough one to find, actually. I'm looking for that. Where is that? I don't know. I don't see it. But I have it, and it's great, and I love it. So, yes. Supreme Joseph sends in a super chat and says, Star Wars time travel movie. A rebel soldier goes back in time to stop Order 66 by assassinated Palpatine. What do you think? I don't know about that. I mean, that could be cool as an Elseworlds. I'd rather see that maybe as a comic book. I don't know about a movie. But I don't like the idea of time. I know there's been time travel in the Star Wars universe. I don't like that. I don't like it. Not a fan. But that could be an interesting story. I could see that being done maybe as a comic or something. Let's see. Omar94 sends in a letter and says, Hi, Rob. I have another letter about movies with huge plot holes. Uh-oh, after the debate about Raiders of the Lost Ark's U-boat scene. So here goes. This is for the Toy Story movies. Toy Story 1 has a huge plot hole involving Buzz Lightyear. Buzz thinks he's a real space ranger and later finds out he's a toy. That's a plot hole. If he thinks he's a space ranger, why does he freeze when he's around humans like Andy, Sid, and Hannah if he knew he was a toy? I don't know if that's a plot hole as much as it is a an issue of perception. Toy Story's 2 plot holes came at the middle and the very end. During the middle, Buzz and the toys have to cross the street to get to Al's toy barn. To get past, they hide under cones and across the street. They hide under cones and cross the street. That's the first plot hole. Why did none of the drivers notice the cones moving? They just went along with it, which caused a number of accidents. At the end of the movie, there's a scene of Ham and Rex watching TV, which has Al crying during a commercial for Al's Toy Barn. That's the second plot hole. The previous night, Al was on a plane to Japan. How could he get back in time to do the commercial overnight? Well, maybe the commercial was filmed later, filmed earlier. I don't think those are plot holes. In Toy Story 3, it's mentioned that the monkey watches all the rooms with cameras from the security office, making sure toys don't escape. That's a plot hole. When kids aren't in the room, the toys come to life, but when the cameras are still on, wouldn't a security guard notice the toys coming to life all this time? I don't know. I think those are just asks. I wouldn't necessarily call them plot holes. But I like that I like the way you think, Omar. I like the way you think. So, yeah. And then, you're writing more than one letter a day. It's getting crazy. It's getting crazy, Omar. It's getting crazy. This one comes from Robin Hoyland. The O in Hoyland has a line through it. I don't know if that's Scandinavian or something and I'm mispronouncing it, but Hi, Robert. I'm Robin. First time writing in, though I've been watching shows with you in them since you first started appearing on John's old show. Was it during the AMC or Collider days? It was AMC. At first, it was AMC, then Collider. More recently, I've been catching up on your shows. I've been hacking away at my own work, and it's quickly become clear that you're the one who keeps stealing my Shuttle Bay parking spot. You see, when it comes to podcasts and similar internet shows, I often gravitate towards people I have a fair amount of disagreement with. not exclusively, but more often than not, I find myself listening to someone who is constantly making me talk back to the screen like a crazy person. So your show has been great for my productivity, as I can listen and nod while I spend the brain cell on the work in front of me instead. Well, I like that. No one's ever said that to me before. Thank you for that. I've tried to write you before, once about Picard and once about Star Wars, but it would appear that you and your compadres have already talked about the issues I've wanted to talk about, so I've never sent those letters. There is a thing I'd like to talk to you about, though. On several occasions, you've brought up the term verisimilitude. No. And I must thank you for introducing me to this articulation of the concept. I'm working on a video game with a friend of mine, and because I'm in charge of charting out our setting and plot, I obviously find myself being concerned about the believability of the fictional world we are creating. By the way, that is good to hear, because video games absolutely have verisimilitude within their realm. So that is something near and dear to my heart. It's easy to concern yourself with the verisimilitude of the works of others, and I too do a lot of concerning about that. However, what puzzles me is that a lot of the people who write these stories don't seem at all concerned about it themselves. I've sat through every single episode of The Flash, and I can't say I haven't enjoyed parts of the show, but I can say not one episode has been great. And a lot of those episodes see non-superpowered bandits run out of a room while Flash tells his team that they got away. I can't tell you how many times some dude has just run away from the fastest man alive. Sometimes even in the very same episodes that Flash runs through an entire city in seconds to look for a bomb or hostage. Or what about Supergirl, the oh-so-amazing super person who in the introduction to every single episode makes it clear to viewers that for her entire life she has avoided saving people's lives because who needs her when they've got Superman, right? She only decided to become a superhero after her sister ends up in a crashing plane, and Supergirl is forced to reveal herself to the world to save her sister's life. Let me rephrase. Every single episode of Supergirl begins with her explaining that she only became a superhero to avoid being shamed for not being one. By gossip mags, no less. That doesn't seem very nice. It seems there simply are not enough people behind each production who asks the right questions. Maybe there are too many yes people. I really have no idea. I just know that it makes me feel like someone has lucked into a job that they probably don't care enough about. I'm not judging anyone for not being fully into their job, but it boggles my mind that no one involved would start asking questions when the legends of tomorrow are combining themselves into a giant Furby so they can fight a demon with love. Verisimilitude is a great term, but as I've come to understand it, it means the appearance of being true or real. That is correct. What I would like to ask you is if you know of a similar word in the concept of staying true to oneself, a verosimilitude, if you will. Perhaps verisimilitude already covers this, but I wanted to ask because it seems like the stories coming from American media in general are becoming increasingly unhinged in regards to the very worlds they are supposed to take place in, never mind the real world. Look at what happened to Rise of Skywalker. It is like the ultimate approximation of what we're talking about here. Did the entirety of Hollywood suffer a mental cataclysm? What is going on? I know I'm generalizing, but it does really seem like this is a growing trend within movies, within TV, comics, and yes, even the news media. It seems like everyone is losing control of the canons, be it their fictional canons or the actual events taking place around us. Different outlets will tell you different truths, and they often contradict themselves, just like the writers of these shows do when they tell us that as long as you can get one door between you and the Flash, you'll be fine. This is starting to get into topics I did not intend to touch on with this letter, so I think I'll cut this one short. I just want to say, though, that my intent is really not to generalize, but I hail from Norway, hence the O. And as an outsider to all of this, it really does seem like these things are in some ways connected. Why do you think it's so hard to remember that the Flash is the fastest man alive? I have one side question. How long is a letter that is too long? I have a bad habit of writing a lot once I start, so if I'm to send you any more letters, it would be good to know when I need to shut myself up. Have a good one, Rob, and before I end this, just let me thank you for being the custodian of this fine community you have built. I am glad to have run across you and everyone involved in the Post-Geek Singularity. Well, let me tell you, Robin, what a lovely letter that is. A lot to unpack in this letter, though. When it comes to things like verisimilitude, I mean, I, as a fan of the cinefantastique, so to speak, that that from the old magazine that Fred Clark started, and that Mark Altman actually purchased. My whole thing, the things that I love, is when our flights of fancy, science fiction, fantasy, horror, thrillers, action films, whatever. I prefer movies that are able to ground themselves in the reality that they have set up for themselves, for instance. Like, and a caveat to that is, if they're doing the exact opposite, like a Bugs Bunny or Roadrunner cartoon, or Bugs Bunny and the Roadrunner, or any of those kinds of, Roadrunner and Wile E. Coyote, right? There's no realism there. I love those cartoons growing up because there's not supposed to be. I like the magical realism of a movie like Amelie, which has a lot of, I guess you'd call them plot holes or not a lot of verisimilitude, but within the confines of what Amelie is and what it wants to do, it works perfectly. I'm not saying that I don't like the fantastical, but you have to play within the rules that you've set up for yourself. It needs to feel true, like you say that the thing about being that verisimilitude is the idea of the concept as being true or real. I think it's being true or real to whatever it is that you're doing. And that's why I think in fantasy, science fiction, and horror, when you establish the rules, those rules are important to follow so you can believe in them. And one of the things that I find very difficult is to deal with, especially in Star Trek, beginning in Star Trek 09, is like people always ask me, well, Rob, what does it matter about the rules of, say, the transporter? Well, one of the things that I love about Star Trek is, even as a little kid, was I believed in everything because it seemed plausible. It had credibility, even when pseudoscience was involved. Warp speed. Is warp speed possible? Who knows? But within the confines of the Star Trek universe, warp speed was presented as being plausible, and I believed it. The same was true of the transporter. Now, when the transporter would do things like, split somebody into two, like in The Enemy Within, I mean, I believed that could happen. The story made me believe. And in Hellraiser, the Cenobites don't just show up. They don't just show up. They show up once they've been summoned. Like, the Cenobites will not just come haunt anyone. They will not just come to tear your soul apart and drag you down into their hell. They're not going to do that. The whole point of the Cenobites is that they have to be summoned by using the lament configuration. You have to open the box, which means the whole point is that you have to want them to show up for whatever reason. If you're a crazy person, or you like Frank Cotton, where nothing satisfies you anymore, and having your soul physically torn apart is the only thing that you think is going to get you off, that's when they come. And so if you're watching a Hellraiser movie, the whole point is like, how are they going to work that in? How are they going to work the lament configuration in? How are they going to work someone's desire in to get them to show up? If the Cenobites just show up just because, it violates their rules. And then I lose interest, because it says to me that the people making those things, they just don't care. And if they don't care, why should I care? You're not going to tell me a story in the Hellraiser universe that I'm going to believe or like, because that's part of the rules that were set up. So I think those things are important. And I think writers that come on to certain franchises, Star Trek, they don't care about those rules. They figure, let's throw them out. But the thing is, when you throw out the rules of, say, the transporter, and make a transporter you can beam from a planet to a ship traveling at warp, which direction you have no idea where it's traveling in, I'm like, okay, you've completely lost me, because you've done something. You wrote yourself into a corner, and that was your choice. And now you're going to violate the rules of this fictional universe just to paint yourself out of that corner. That's my problem with J.J. Abrams in a nutshell. He just does whatever he wants because, I've just separated Kirk from this planet. How am I going to have Spock and Scotty and Kirk get back to the Enterprise? I'll just have them beam there. Well, when you do that, and that's your attitude, all the rest of your story falls apart. You have a villain that's gone back in time 90 years or whatever, and he's mad because his home planet was blown up. Well, why wouldn't the first thing you do once you know you traveled back in time 90 years, why wouldn't you go to your planet? Why wouldn't you be smart enough to be like, oh my God, I can go warn everybody that this nova is going to happen, and then maybe I can travel into the future and my planet will be saved and my wife won't be dead, and all the reason I've gone back in time or all the reasons that I'm mad will be gone. But no, he doesn't. And once you've done something, once you've made your villain an unbelievable moron, like Nero is in Star Trek '09, I tune out. I'm like, you're a fucking idiot, the people that wrote this script, and J.J. Abrams for directing this movie, because your villain is dumb. All he does is stupid things. You know, Captain Rabaul comes over from the Kelvin. Oh, do you know this man? No, I don't know Ambassador Spock, because he's not Ambassador Spock yet, because you went back in time 90 years, so let's kill the captain of this Starfleet vessel. Because we're the dumbest villains that have ever appeared in a science fiction movie. We're a bunch of stupid idiots. And when you're an idiot like that, kind of like the entirety of what goes on in Rise of Skywalker, like you mentioned, I tune out. I mean, because these are questions that you should solve when you start writing them on the page. It's not good. But anyway, I go off. I digress. I think, look, the problem in this country is news has become, you know, it's all about ratings. It's for profit. When things become for profit, remember how CBS was a loss? When things become for profit, all that matters is now making money. The actual truth in news is less important as to how many people are watching it, how much advertising revenue are you going to get, can you appeal to your base, what can you do to get those clicks, and then the actual content goes away. What has happened is we have unchecked capitalism happening in the United States, and it's breaking our system. When you don't look, I understand. You know, I watch videos of $15 million mansions I'll never be able to live in anyway that I would love to live in if I had $15 million. Everybody wants to get very, very wealthy, but the problem that we have here, especially here in America, I think, is that unfettered, unchecked capitalism, our system has been perverted and it's been broken by people that don't want to play within the rules. They're breaking the rules and they're destroying the systems that were usually would stop these things from happening. And it's problematic. And that's what it really is. It's unchecked, unfettered capitalism. And I'm a capitalist. I believe in capitalism. But if you're getting your profits unfairly by perverting the news, for instance, I mean, CBS famously let their news division operate at a loss because their news division, they wanted to keep it pure. It's unfortunate. What are you gonna do? We're all putting up with it, so it's kind of odd, but it's a little bizarre. What can you do? I don't know the answer. I'm not a social scientist. I wish I was, though. I kind of wish I was. I mean, you know, I want to be. Don't get me wrong. It's not that I want to be rich, but everybody's getting filthy rich. Corporations are making tons of money. I'm not even anti-corporation, but eventually what you're doing is you're chipping away at the very foundations of our society rather than bolstering them and strengthening them. That's why I don't understand, why isn't healthcare and education our first line of national security? Why isn't that first line of defense? Why don't you couch healthcare and education as defense spending? America's now, if I was running for president, that would be my big platform, is that, okay, if we're spending this much on military security, the first thing we have to do is make sure we have a completely healthy nation and a very educated nation. That's where our first monies should go. But there's no profit in that for other companies. You know, if you're Lockheed Martin, you're not going to, how are you going to benefit from that? But that's why. That's until we figure out a way to figure out that cycle of unfettered capitalism, that's going to be all of our ruin, because if all you care about is profits, you're not caring about the only way. I mean, you still have to have a working civilization in order to have a good capitalistic society. You have to have a society that's actually working as a society. But now we've completely perverted all of our systems to the point where the underlying our the bedrock of our civilization, the stability of our civilization isn't there anymore. And we're seeing that. We're seeing that in many different areas. I don't know what's going to happen, but how does that reflect back on the Flash? The verisimilitude of the Flash? I just think with the CW shows, they're a little bit more fast and loose. They work the same way that DC Comics used to work, where it's much more playful and it has less. They don't care so much about creating the real world. It's more of a comic book world, and I enjoy those shows for that reason. But I can understand when you're going back and watching things that have more verisimilitude, watching the CW shows might not be as satisfying. We've got a letter from Ian Samuels is here, ladies and gentlemen. Rob and fellow Robservationists, what really happened at 112 Ocean Avenue, an unassuming address in the small town of Amityville, Long Island? According to police and the media, Ronald Butch Defoe Jr. Killed his parents and 4 siblings, and then the Lutz family moved in and claimed they had supernatural experiences and left. Then Ed and Lorraine Warren investigated. On the night of the 13th of November 1974, Ronald Defoe Sr., his wife Louise, and children Allison, John, and Mark were shot dead on one floor of the house, while Dawn was shot and killed on the top floor. The police report used for the case against Ronald Butch Defoe Jr. said he had taken a 35mm Marlin rifle and shot all of them, but during the original investigation, there were some questions that this version of the report ignored. The first ballistic report revealed that the parents and the younger children had been killed by a 35mm Marlin, but that Dawn had been killed using a handgun. Also, the report pointed out that Dawn's hands and her dress showed signs of gunpowder residue, which would suggest she had fired a rifle. An undercover drug squad police detective had been watching the property and reported that on the night of the murders, he had seen Dawn Defoe leave the property wearing a fur-lined hooded anorak and black gloves and carrying a rifle, which she carried down to the dock and dropped into the water, which was the precise location the police later found the rifle. Also, a ballistic test was carried out, firing an identical Marlin rifle in the house, the same number of shots before asking the neighbors to find out the distance the shots could be heard. The shots were heard easily up to 5 blocks away. On the night of the murders, no one reported hearing any shots. As Butch was taken away by the police, his grandfather approached and was heard to say, "I don't want the family name dragged through the dirt anymore. I don't want to hear any more about your sister, and I don't want to hear any more about the one. You will take the rap for all of the murder." So based on the evidence, it seems the most likely events were that Butch and Dawn had made a pact to kill their abusive father, but on that night Butch had taken drugs and was no fit state to do anything, and so Dawn carried out the murders, but instead of killing just their father, she for some reason ends up deciding to kill all of them. She then, in her anorak and black gloves, took the rifle to Butch before taking it to the docks and throwing it into the water. In his drug-fueled haze, Butch recalled seeing what he described as a black-handed demon handing him the rifle. This description matches that of the drug squad detective of Dawn. When Butch was through his drug haze enough, he was shocked by the scene and took his handgun and went up to Dawn's room and shot her. Before the trial, the local newspaper carried headlines about murders and graphic details, all pointing the finger at the only surviving member of the family, Ronald Jr., otherwise known as Butch. So when evidence was left out of the one offered to the jury, who were all from the local area and would have seen something on local papers or TV news, they had no option but to find Butch guilty. So what about the Lutz family? Well, one of the people they met up with was Ronald Defoe Jr.'s defense lawyer, who shared information about the murder scene inside the house while they drank copious amounts of wine. The story they told to Jay Anson was based on this information. All but one of the Lutz children have admitted that their parents' story was untrue. The Lutzes made quite a bit of money from the book, from the film, and anytime they felt their version was not being told, they would sue. As for the Warrens, well, they are two of America's biggest ever con merchants. They would carry out their investigations, sign agreements with families, promising not to use their story for profit before going on to write books and sell their stories to Hollywood. So Ronald Defoe Jr., guilty of murder of his family or just his sister, found guilty by a trial of media before his legal trial. Was the actions of the police and district attorney to get their conviction morally correct? Well, these are the facts. The rest is up to you, Ian. Well, Ian, I don't know what the facts are, but I tend not to believe in ghosts. I tend not to believe in hauntings. Not to say they're not true, but definitely something to think about. I haven't read all of that, so that is very, very interesting. I'd rather believe that there are demons, to be honest. I want to believe that there are demons. I want to believe that the supernatural exists. I want to be able to believe that Batboy exists. All of that. I really do. And I just don't think it's all true. I wish it were. Jeffrey Mao writes in and says, "Hi, Rob. That recent YouTube video of a guy doing the heavy metal cover of Toss a Coin to Your Witcher, hat tip to you for tweeting that, got me thinking a lot about how fan bases for heavy metal, fantasy, and horror have a lot of crossover and influence on each other. I think Dieter Bastian would have a lot to say about that. One of the things that I love about our Post-Geek Singularity is not only do we talk about the things that we love, but we talk about being a fan, what it's like to be a fan, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Perhaps in the past, depending on how old we were, it was not as easy to be a fan as it is now, both in terms of finding like-minded people to share our fandom, as well as having your fandom be accepted and feeling confident in openly expressing your fandom. I think that's why there was a lot of crossover between fantasy, horror, and heavy metal in the 80s, because none of them were mainstream at all, and all had incorrect but negative public reputations and accusations concerning their perceived harm to kids. Now, for certain kids, if you tell them something is bad, well, they're going to want to like it even more, not less. I mean, I'm sure some people thought Dungeons & Dragons was some kind of cult where kids sat around wearing black robes, planning group suicides or animal sacrifices or who knows what. If, as a kid, you were into that, then it's not a far step to be interested in music that has the same outsider status that was hated on by the mainstream, and that's heavy metal. Now, I liked Prince and Madonna and Michael Jackson back then like everyone else, but I also love Van Halen, AC/DC, Ozzy, Twisted Sister, Iron Maiden, and later Metallica, Megadeth, Slayer, and all the rest. The connections between horror and heavy metal were more evident then, with bands like AC/DC contributing songs to soundtracks for films like Maximum Overdrive. Lovecraftian themes permeated heavy metal, with Metallica songs like Call of Cthulhu and The Thing That Should Not Be. Among the most famous, lead guitarist Kirk Hammett is a very avid collector of horror movie memorabilia, but fantasy had a strong connection as well. You had bands like Black Sabbath, Rush, Led Zeppelin, and Styx all writing songs with Lord of the Rings inspirations behind them. Later on, to the 2000s, as I delved into power and black metal, did I find even deeper connections between Lord of the Rings and heavy metal. You had bands and musicians naming themselves after stuff in the books. You had Sweden's Amon Amarth, named for the alternate translation of Mount Doom, though their music is very Viking Norse-inspired. You also had Morgoth and Burzum. Orc names were adopted by Norwegians Shagrat and the infamous Count Grishnak, who murdered a fellow musician. But for the band who truly embraced Tolkien like no other, look no further than Germany's Blind Guardian. From doing straight-up minstrel songs that would not sound out of place being sung by Jaskier the Bard to a full-on concept album called Nightfall in Middle-earth, they're pretty much the unofficial band of Tolkien. I've always wanted to give love for Blind Guardian here on Robservations. They're an amazing band. If you like balls-out, bombastic power metal cranked up to 11 with a chorus and orchestral accompaniment and all that, they're the band for you. Have a great day and a great listen for those of you who are interested. Jeff, what a great letter, Jeff. Thank you for that. Yeah, look, all about that iconography. I mean, I liked horror and I liked metal too. I mean, I was not a metal head, and I preferred more punk and more alternative, but I dug those bands. I liked prog rock. I mean, I was more of for me, music that steered or swerved more into the sci-fi realm was more my speed. That's why I like Styx, Come Sail Away, obviously. But one of my favorite Styx songs of all time is Castle Walls. Once in a dream, by these only castle walls, I stood alone while the minstrel sang his song. I love all that stuff. And I think it's great. And look, it totally crosses over. If you like horror, you like horror movies, you like horror novels, you like horror shows, you like monsters and all that. Of course you like metal. I mean, as a kid, the first band I loved was Kiss. I remember when I was 10 years old, I got Kiss Alive, the first double live album. It was awesome. I mean, I played that record all the time. And then, it was on that record, I think on the back, maybe it was, I don't know if it was an insert or something, but that's where I first saw, Kiss had an album called Hotter Than Hell. No one's going to buy an album called Hotter Than Hell and give it to a 10-year-old kid, but I got it, you know. And Kiss was great because you had a demon and you had an astronaut and you had a star child and you had a werecat. You know, Peter Criss was the werecat. I always thought of him as a werecat. So, I mean, Kiss was like the ultimate genre, the ultimate imagination connoisseur band. And when you're 10 years old, I mean, come on. And then when they went disco with I Was Made for Loving You, that was some great stuff back then. I loved all that. Let's see. David Tapia is here and sends in a chip, and he says, "Hi, Rob. As a big physical media collector, over 6,000. Nice. I've run into the space issue. What are your thoughts on consolidating or removing duplicate titles? I started to pull DVDs to donate, but noticed that some special features never got carried over. Man, that is the big question. You know what I did? I probably have, I don't know, 2,500 or 3,000. Now, maybe more if you include like anime and stuff. Let's say I've got like 3,500 total things on physical media. I decided to curate my collection. And I had to, there had to be a real reason for me to keep, because I would collect everything. But there's a lot of things like I'll tell you something. And this might be, people are going to be like, oh, I got rid of all my Friday the 13th movies except the original Friday the 13th. And I did that because I never particularly liked the Friday the 13th movies. To me, were movies that I loved seeing in a theater with an audience, especially opening night. But I never watched them. I bought them. I used to buy movies. Like, I remember when New Line put out that dope DVD box set of all the Nightmare on Elm Street films. And then it was like, okay, I never watched them. And I didn't like all of them. And it was like, do I need them all? So I started asking myself those questions. The original Friday the 13th I really liked because I actually really liked the movie. But, you know, it set a tone. It has a place in film history. And the sequels were variations on the theme. And they never... They were editing the violence out by then anyway. They were toning the violence down. I like the extreme violence of the first one, too. Tom Savini's effects. So you just have to get down to the point where you're like... And really, I start asking myself that question. Even now, even all the physical media I have. I mean, I'm going through... I've separated out my Blu-rays and 4Ks from my DVDs, unless it's weird. I mean, like, I have a lot of, like, Gundam episodes on DVD, which I have not picked up on Blu-ray yet. I don't know if I will. Maybe I would, but, you know, I've got some stuff on... the later stuff on Blu-ray, but it's crazy. You have to decide. And you have to think, like, okay, all these books here... Like, I love having my graphic novels. I love collecting them and all. But how many times do I really look at them? I'll read them and put them on the shelf. And will I go back and look at them? All of them? Like, all these graphic novels? I don't know. Maybe. But I think it's a question you have to ask yourself. And I do think there's something to be said about paring things down to the best of the best. I used to think that I have to have all of this stuff. So when people came in, they were impressed by my collections. Like, look, this girl's going to know that I have every copy of this. No, they never do. I mean, now, you know, being older and settled down, but when you're dating, you figure, yeah, she's going to be really impressed by my collection. They never were. But they were impressed if you could sit down and watch a movie and that they wanted to see and you had it, you know, something like that. But it gets to the point where, what are you in competition with? You should collect the stuff. You should really collect the stuff that you love. And if you don't love it, it's like this idea, well, look, I agree. There are titles I will hold on to simply to have them because I think they might go away. That's legit. I think that's legit. But for the most part, as I get older, I'm like, if I don't love this stuff, I'm not going to keep it. And I do periodically go through my collections of film, and I'm like, you know what? Do I need this? I'll watch it one more time, and I'm like, okay, if I don't think I could ever show it to somebody, like, there have been movies that I've even kept that I thought, oh, somebody would enjoy. I'm glad I would have this because somebody would like, I could show this to somebody later, and it's more fun to watch with somebody. So, yeah. But yeah, I mean, you have to decide. It's all, what is it that you like? You know, what gives you enjoyment? If it doesn't give you enjoyment, it should go. It should go. Because you know what I've also realized? you can get everything you want. I mean, it might be more expensive, like Hot Toys are more expensive. You know, it was interesting. I never got from Sideshow, I never got the Hot Toys exclusive, the Dark Anakin Hot Toys figure from Revenge of the Sith. And they had it for a long time. And then finally I just put it on a payment plan. And when the last thing was going to come in, the last payment plan, and this wasn't that long ago, they wrote me and they said they had no more left. They sold out of it. It was gone. And I thought that by securing it on a payment plan that you would get it. And now that figure is like $500, $600, $700. And I was bummed, you know. And I really wanted that because I've got the Obi-Wan and I wanted to do a Revenge of the Sith display. So, you know, I've got to figure out how can I get that figure one day. I'll have to buy maybe a used one on the secondary market or something. I don't know. But only collect what you love. Don't collect everything. Because I used to think you had to have everything. And I've changed that. I mean, I'd still like everything, but, you know, unless I have all the disposable income in the world, which I don't, everything I buy now is like a treat. It's a privilege. Bob Tozy sends in a tip and says, I bought that Sony 4K player mentioned in the article on Black Friday last year. I don't own a 4K TV yet, but I wanted to have the player since they'll be harder to come by. Yes, it's still in the box at the ready like some physical media doomsday prepper. Oh, dude, Bob, since you and I have the same name, I will tell you that was not unusual. I started buying Laserdiscs for a year before I had a player. A year. And I knew I was going to get a player, and when I got my player finally, I had probably about 30 Laserdiscs, and it was great sitting down and going through them. You're going to be really happy, too. You're going to be really happy when you finally get that 4K set. You know, I want to upgrade my TV, too. I want to get a new 4K set, and I find it difficult. I really want a Panasonic OLED set, but they don't sell them in the United States. And I want one that's like at least 77 inches, it's killing me. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, this kind beings, gentle souls, this brings me to an end of Robservations episode number 423. I want to thank everybody for supporting the channel. I want to thank everybody for being here. It's a lot of fun reading your letters. I've got more letters, obviously, tomorrow. And more things to read tomorrow, and we'll have another topic tomorrow. And I'm actually do some work on the Robservatory now. I want to move some storage around and move some things around. So I will see you. Hopefully you'll all be able to join us in a mere 3 hours for Elizabeth's Whining About Movies, episode number 31 for John Borman's Excalibur. I'm very excited for this episode, actually. Watching Excalibur is always a treat. And it was funny watching. Elizabeth doesn't really tell me what she thinks about the movies until we are actually on the show. And she was perplexed by the change. And it's very funny. I don't know if you have this. When you're watching a movie with somebody, you're showing somebody, maybe it's a significant other, maybe it's a friend, and it might be a movie that you love. But when you're watching it with somebody, you're experiencing their reactions. And if people feel they can talk to you or whatever. And when somebody has a very different reaction or because you're seeing them respond to it, you see the movie in a different light. And that kind of happened with Excalibur because there's a definite turn in the movie where the movie basically when everything goes all to hell and the Knights of the Round Table have to go on the Grail quest. And the movie gets really weird. And I've always accepted it, but Elizabeth was having a hard time with it. So I'm curious to hear what she's going to say tonight on Elizabeth's Views. So join us at 6 for Whining About Movies, where we talk about John Borman's 1981 Excalibur. Interesting note, I'd seen Excalibur. I wasn't a huge fan when it first came out, but I went and saw it a second time because there was a public sneak preview before it opened of a movie called Raiders of the Lost Ark that I was beside myself with excitement to see. So I went and saw Excalibur at the Factoria Cinemas in Bellevue, Washington, and then my friends and I saw Raiders. And back then, even if you go look up the very first trailer for Raiders of the Lost Ark, you're like, what is this movie about? It was very interesting. So we didn't really know. So it was pretty crazy. But we'll see you in 3 hours for Elizabeth's Whining About Movies. Join us then. It should be fun. Excalibur. Remember, every person you meet has a story to tell you have yet to hear. And all you have to do is listen. And with that, I say thank you to my moderating staff, Mike Bodden, Detective Jim Boyers, his wife Heidi. I don't know why I like to say that. Greg Smith, Lewis Yu, Jordy Lyons, and of course the Richard. And if you haven't been enjoying or joining the Richard on either the Whining About Movies Facebook page or the Post-Geek Singularity Facebook page, Richard is killing it with, he has these watch parties that like run all day. And he's showing, it's like the Richard Film Festival. And there's trailers and there's craziness and there's movies and there's all kinds of stuff. So if you go to the Post-Geek Singularity or the Whining About Movies Facebook page, find the Richard, tell him I sent you, and join one of his watch parties and comment because they're hilarious, the stuff that he puts on. You never know. It's great. And with that, I will bring an end to this. I have a problem with endings, don't I? I'm sorry about that. Well, thank you all for being here. I very much appreciate everyone. So goodbye to the Post-Geek Singularity. Goodbye to you Imagination Connoisseurs. Once again, thanks for all the support and all the love. I very much appreciate it. And I will be back tomorrow, mañana.